Now we will move on to co-creating a team culture, which also in many ways relates to values and values-based leadership. To co-create means to create together. So co-creating a team culture is something we always do with our football teams at Fotboll da Força, just as we check in and out. So co-creating a culture is a tool that makes it easier for us to create a safe space within the team. And it's a great way to start a new season with your team. Cultures form in all groups simply through how we act towards each other in the group. However, when we don't consciously decide what culture we want to have in a group, usually people who are heard and seen the most affect the culture the most, and the rest simply follow their lead. When the culture is formed that way, it simply becomes what it becomes. It may result in having a nice team culture where we have a lot of fun, but it can also result in having a culture that doesn't feel safe and good for everyone. So for example, it is possible that a nice culture with a lot of jokes develops into a culture where the jokes become jargon and where players make jokes at the expense of other players, which can erode both individual players' self-esteem and the sense of belonging and feeling of team spirit within the team. Creating a team culture together, meaning to have a clear culture that everyone feels that they have been participating in creating, gives a sense of safety and trust in the group, and builds a long-term team culture that also keeps the safe space in the group over time. It is much easier to be in a group when we have agreed on how we want to be with each other, and when we know what is expected of us and what we can expect of our teammates. So many times we as leaders make rules for our teams. We often define what we don't want the players to do. For example, don't speak when someone else is speaking, or don't bounce the ball when we gather for instructions. So these rules focus on behaviors that we don't want, rather than what we want to see in the team. So instead of being a leader limiting and controlling our players, we want the team themselves to define what behaviors they want, how they want to treat each other. So co-creating a team culture in a structured way gives you an agreement within the team that you can always then also go back to if conflicts arise or if the culture develops in a way that has a negative effect on players. It is very important that the team culture develops together with everyone in the team participating, so that all players feel that the team culture is theirs and that they all have equal value to the team. When everyone is involved in creating the team culture, the players will also remember and follow it to a greater extent, and then can therefore remind each other about it. So, gather your team and simply ask them, how do they want to be with each other? What culture do they want to have in the team? What is important for them? Before writing down the team culture, so basically what your players end up discussing and agreeing on as the team culture, it is important that you as a leader confirm each culture principle with the whole group to make sure that everyone understands the principle and feels comfortable and happy with it. So it's even more important to define words together, since everyone can have different experiences with it. So for example, the principle respect. For one person, it might mean that you never question someone else. But for another, it means that you are always honest, even if you disagree. For a third person, it might mean that you listen to a person more than talking yourself. So often, there are many ways to define a word. And it is easy to believe that we all think about the same thing when thinking about this word, even though that's likely not the case. So we need to bring these words and principles up for discussion to make sure that we create a culture that all understand and agree with. So don't simply let your players say, well, we want to respect each other, and just leave it at that. But try to go deeper and understand what behaviors do they want us to then have to show respect. As a leader, when writing down the principles that your players agree on for their team culture, you should write down all principles as verbs, so as actual possible actions or behaviors. Also, make sure that you're focusing on the behaviors that you want to have in your team, instead of those that you don't want to have. So for example, if someone suggests, don't interrupt other people, you need to help them turn this into a possible behavior, maybe by asking, when we're not interrupting others, what is it that we then do? So focusing on what behavior we want to have. Because in order to change a behavior, which we want to if it's a behavior that we don't want to have in our team, we need to know what to do instead. Because if we're instructed to not do something, we're very much likely to end up thinking about exactly that. So, for example, if I say, don't think about a pink elephant, one part of your brain will be busy not thinking about it, while another part of your brain will be busy keeping track on that you're not thinking about it. And all of this activity leaves you pretty much just thinking about the pink elephant. So, instead of agreeing on that you, for example, don't want to interrupt each other, agree on that you want to listen to each one when they speak until they've said what they wanted to say. You as a leader become the most important cultural role model. But you can also appoint cultural role models in your team, so players that then get an extra responsibility for the culture to be what has been agreed, making sure that everyone treats each other according to the principles and values you've agreed on in the team. To keep the culture alive, you can also rotate this responsibility among your players on a regular basis. Co-creating a team culture is a good thing to do every time before you start leading a new group or before a new season. It is also good to now and then evaluate your team culture together, so that everyone in the team understands it and feels that it's still relevant. And if there is a conflict or a changed group dynamic, an evaluation of the culture often leads to a good conversation about what has happened in the team and allows for the team culture to continue to thrive and be one that boosts your team